is here sitting with us in the front pew. In our Franciscan tradition, being welcoming and hospitable is foundational. There's no exclusionary impulse in Franciscan spirituality. And when I arrived in Goffstown, I heard about the Reverend Bill Exner and got to know him. And when I saw how hospitable and welcoming and inclusive he was, I said to myself, there's a priest who lives the gospel of Christ Jesus, who identifies with it and who lives it. Some of you know that Pope Francis spoke last year, and Pope Francis said, imagine a priest who does not welcome everybody into his church. What would the Pope say? He says, this is what I would say. Close the doors, lock the doors. Either everybody is welcomed in our churches or nobody enters. That's from the words of the Pope of the Vatican. When I got to know Reverend Bill Exner, I saw that he was a man who welcomes, embraces the people that he meets. So I was so thrilled to be a priest with Reverend Exner in the community, because it sort of gave me a sense of support and security, because it can be a lonely journey. But when you have a team and people work together, it was wonderful. So I'm honored to have you here. Thank you. Also honored to have an evangelical pastor with us. Pastor Chris is sitting at the end. Pastor Chris, would you stand up a minute? Thank you. Pastor Chris is a pastor of an evangelical church in Manchester. Pastor Chris and I have had a number of talks at Panera's Bread in Manchester. So it's been wonderful to get to know Pastor Chris, sharing his ministry, sharing my ministry, knowing once again that God unites us. God doesn't divide us. We do that. We divide among ourselves, but God always unites us. And this is all a beautiful manifestation to have two members of the clergy here. I'm honored for that. My sisters and brothers, I just want to share with you briefly. That's tough for me, right? 7 mountaintop experiences. I'm going to do it quickly. There were many mountaintop experiences in the last 30 years as a priest and my 12 years as seminarian prior to the priesthood. But I came down with 7 because 7 is a biblical number. It's a biblical number. The first mountaintop experience, I was 14 years old. I entered seminary in Bucksport, Maine, the Our Lady of Mary Immaculate. Right out of the 8th grade, I didn't even know how to wash behind the back of my ears. Just babies entering into seminary. But I remember that first week, we're all traumatized by the way, that first week. 100 seminarians, all traumatized, trying to make sense of what decision we had made. But I remember that first week, the faculty invited us into the gymnasium, and so 100 seminarians just sitting in circles right in the middle of the gymnasium was a stage. And they were 4 guitarists who were leading us, and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Bob Dylan, and the rest, and the rest. This is 1966, right? That's how old I am. And I remember sitting there saying, oh man, I wish I could play the guitar. And there's a seminarian sitting next to me, I don't know who he was. We're still strangers to each other. He looked at me and he said, well then, pick up a guitar and learn. It's okay. So I called home, and Mom and Dad had Dick send his guitar, his old clunker. They sent the old clunker to Bucksport, and there it is. I can't imagine not playing the guitar. What happened with the spiritual mystery to this is that when I got bored playing the guitar at some point, all of a sudden began to soar because I offered the guitar to God. As this would be your guitar, this would be your ministry, I would use this for sacramental and ministerial purposes. And it was at that point that I soared, because then I started playing not only the chords of the guitar, but the notes as well. So I integrated the chords and the notes together, and then the guitar became what? Exciting. I was no longer bored with it, but I gave it to God. And I can't imagine not playing it today, because that has also healed me of many wounds that I've had also inflicted on my life. Secondly, some mountaintop experience. Gerry Bergeron talk so much about it. The seminary the undergraduate seminary in Natick was my Camelot experience. It was 1970, when the Social Revolution happened, and the Second Vatican Council happened. Pope John XXIII said, it's stuffy in the Roman Catholic Church, open up the windows, and the Second Vatican Council, which to me was God's great blessing on our church. I can't imagine living without the Second Vatican Council. But that Camelot experience was an experience where the people in a 50-mile radius, from Sherburne, from Newton, from Wellesley, from Ashland, 50-mile radius were all coming to our seminary. To the point that we couldn't overfit them in the chapel, and then they were coming to our programs, Christian formation programs, and ended up with a community of thousands of people, doctors and nurses, and then street workers, and cooks, and the community that was built was so beautiful because the status and position was no longer important. It was loving and supporting your brother and your sister in a way that I didn't think would ever happen on the planet Earth. But it happened in Natick, the Camelot experience. And one of our priests said to me, Gerry, we just had a very unusual experience here with this Camelot experience. But he says, don't think it's going to be like that in the world. So I'm telling you, what you need to do is let that experience strengthen you from within. Reap the gifts that you were given in this experience so that the struggles and the tribulations will be anointed by that grace and experience. I had a Camelot experience. I experienced heaven on earth for 3 years in Natick, Massachusetts. So I know it can happen. I know it can happen. The third mountaintop experience, left New England to go to Covenant House in New York City. We lived in Times Square, 44th and 8th Avenue, working with runaway kids, from Maine to California. They come to New York thinking they're going to enter into paradise. They discover a different story. It was there that I met the Franciscan friars at Covenant House. It's there that I met St. Francis of Assisi. It's there that I met St. Clare of Assisi. It's there that I actually fell in love with Franciscan spirituality. The more I got into the spirituality of St. Francis, the more deeply it was impacting my life. And I recognized that even as growing up as a child in Berlin with the woods and the camping trips and the hikes up Mount Washington and the fishing expeditions with my brother Dick, on trout fishing, the woods, the country, the birds, the deer, the bear, it was all Franciscan. I didn't realize I didn't make the connection until later. It was already a part of me. So when I met the Franciscan spirituality, it just hit like a ton of bricks. And the prayer of St. Francis that we prayed so often, right here, has become my signature. It's what I lived by. That's how I want to end today, by the way. I always start my ministry with the prayer of St. Francis, always end it. So don't let me finish this with saying the prayer of St. Francis. The fourth mountaintop experience, once I entered the Franciscans, they sent me to the Cree Indians up in Alberta, Canada, 100 miles north of Edmonton, a reserve of 800 natives, alcoholism being a rampant problem, child neglect a rampant problem. So my life was really anointed by the experience. And there are two events that I'll never forget. I mean, it's still clear in my head, but there was a 3-year-old child crying at 10 o'clock at night at his trailer, wanting to get inside the trailer. And I was living with a nun, Sister of the Assumption. I'm with another Franciscan friar as well. And I said to Sister, I said, there's a child crying at the trailer. His mom and dad's not letting him in. What's going on? She looked at me, she said, they're at the tavern. It happens all the time. She said, go get the child, bring him here, and I'll call out the social worker who's an Indian. went up because I'm a stranger. I don't know a 3-year-old boy is going to react. I got up there, oh, but he jumped in my arms. He was terrified. So I brought him back to the house, and we took care of him. Sister called up the social worker, and she came in, and boy, was she was austere. But be careful the words I use. She was a strong lady. And of course, she went down to the 5 miles away to pick up the parents, and basically told the parents, this happens again, and we're taking the kids away from you. So, the riot act. So, the other event was, I was playing soccer with the Indian boys. That was part of the ministry, by the way, playing soccer with them. They loved soccer. I guess soccer in Canada is big too. I guess it's big in England, it's big in Canada as well. So we did a lot of soccer playing. And when it was time to leave, there was a 14-year-old who was particularly attached to me. And the day before departure, he looks at me and says, you're going to leave, and you're going to forget all about us. You're going to go back to your comfortable life, and you're going to forget all about us. Well, my heart broke. I still tear up when I say this, by the way. But my heart broke at that moment. And I said to myself, I am going back to a comfortable life, I know it. I'll have food to eat, I'll have a warm roof to live under. But I said to him, I said, I will never forget this experience. I will never forget you. At that point, he gives me a coin, and which I didn't want to take at first, but he insisted. He said, this is how you promise you won't forget us. I took the coin with me, and I told him, I promise, I will never forget you. He was 14 in 1983. Now, he's a man, he's married, he's got kids of his own. And I still did not forget him. I still speak about him. I wish I could tell him. My 5th mountaintop experience, Medjugorje. Our Lady started appearing, and by the way, even though the church hasn't spoken on it yet, I am completely convinced it's authentic. These kids would have broken down psychologically if they had lied about this stuff. 6 children cannot live a lie like this for how many years now? 30 years? Can't do it. It's impossible. Psychologically, they break down. So in 1981, our lady starts appearing to the visionaries in Medjugorje. In 1985, I'm doing my theology. Somebody tells me about it. I start laughing, and I said, take a couple aspirin, go to bed. You'll feel better in the morning. And don't bring me these nonsensical stories. And then went to bed that night. Got up next morning. Somebody possessed me with a videotape on Medjugorje. I guess I got to do this just to satisfy people. I watched it. I was convicted. I don't know what happened to me. It's like something came into my head, right through my body, like a lightning strike. And I knew at that point that this was real. The church doesn't say anything until the apparitions are done, but it's still going on with a couple of visionaries. That's why, although Pope Francis just said to the Catholic community, go to Medjugorje on pilgrimage. This is now an official Catholic pilgrimage site. Pope Francis made that announcement this past year. Went 4 times, and was anointed 4 times. Sister Bridget McKenna was there, for those of you who know her. She's a healing Irish nun. She prayed over me there in Medjugorje. And then I asked one of the visionaries, would you ever come to my church in New Hampshire? He said, yeah. My first pastorship in Keene, he came, and the chancery people, the officials of the chancery says, how did you ever get him to come to a church in Keene, New Hampshire? I said, I picked up the phone, and I talked. And then he came to my church in Nashua, where I was pastor, and then he came here at St. Lawrence. Our Lady has always been a big part of my ministry. When I got very sick, I went to Lourdes and spent time with Our Lady there in prayer and conversation. When it came down to the time of ordination, we were supposed to get ordained in May or June. Usually it's June, beginning of June. That particular year, in my class, the bishop decides, we won't do a June ordination, we'll wait till October. And we're all scratching our heads, why is he doing this? And he said, October 7th, he said it. And so I looked up October 7th, that's a nothing day. happens to be the Feast of Our Lady of the Holy Rosary. So there's a big connection with my ministry with Our Lady. She has ministered to me from heaven throughout the course of my ministry. My sixth mountaintop experience was at Gerry. You know, when I got very sick and I had no platelets in my body, and the doctor told me it was on the fence between life and death. Because if I break a bone, there's nothing to clot. The blood's going to roll up. They hospitalized me at the time. And so I got so frightened by that by the time, it took 3 months to get my platelets to come back. By the time the platelets came back, my meditation on death and dying exploded inside of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on her research on death and dying. Then I got into Ray Moody, Father, and then D.E.'s. Then I got into the literature from doctors and cardiologists and neurosurgeons and PhD level psychologists and psychiatrists, and then the ordinary folks who are having NDEs. I couldn't get enough of it. I devoured it. And I discovered how God used it, because I was called to so many beds where my brothers and sisters were dying. And all of this research and study and preparation prepared me for what was ahead with the death and dying issue. When I got my pastorship in Nashua, I prayed. I asked God for a favor. I said, God, I don't ask you too many favors. It's not my style. I just say, anoint me, let me do your will. But I said, I'm asking for something. I says, I'd like to meet a near-death experiencer who's published. Who's well known. And what happened is a book fell off the shelf. It was Near-Death, Fast Lane to Heaven by Ned Doherty, who had a near-death experience in 1985. I read the book. I was really fascinated. And since he has a connection with the Maryknoll Missionary Fathers in Long Island, I called up the Maryknoll Missionary Fathers and said who I was, what I've done, and my desire, my prayer to meet. And he said to me, well, you know, this is not a retreat center here. We're a religious house. Retreat centers on Long Island, they're in New York City. And I said, I know that. But I said, because I'm a Catholic priest, and I can give you my bishop's name, you can call him up and see if I'm a crazy person. And I said, this is really a dream that I have to meet, and I know he goes to Mass at your shrine in Eastport, Long Island. So when I said, I'll give you my bishop's name and tell him when I'm going to call him up, he laughed at that point. He says, I'm not calling a bishop. Come on down. So I went down, and I said to the superior, all I want is 20 minutes. I don't want to be a nag, be annoying to him. If I can only have 20 minutes. Well, Mr. Ned Doherty was informed by the superior, this kid from New Hampshire, a Catholic priest, wants to see you real bad. And so Ned did not give me 20 minutes. He gave me 2 full days. 2 full days. He even brought me to the places where mystical experiences had happened. The first one is when he collapsed. He collapsed right outside of his club, Marrakesh, his club. I remember he was a rich man, millionaire, playboy, alcoholic, cocaine user. He did all those things and had a near-death experience, which is so powerful. He comes back and he tells everybody, God gave me a second chance. I messed up, he said, real bad in life. And God gave me a second chance, and his whole life changed. Now he's ministering to everybody all over the world. So near-death experience, the near-death experience, another mountaintop experience, and finally the last one, of course, is ordination. There's no words for ordination. The mystical and inner experience that I went through with my ordination is too deep for words. Just that it was a heavenly moment, and a moment that I have continually thanked God for 30 years as a priest. you're assigned to your first church. I was in New Jersey, right? I got ordained for the Archdiocese of New Jersey. And my first church as an associate, for instance, the pastor there, I was the associate, was Sacred Heart Church in Rochelle Park, New Jersey. And when I left, they didn't want me to forget my honeymoon church. Okay, this is a honeymoon, you know. The first church is a honeymoon. You're in love. You're completely in love. And it's so intense and beautiful. They put together this picture of the sanctuary, so I would never forget my honeymoon. So I kept my honeymoon with me for 30 years wherever I went. But now that I'm retiring, there's a gentleman here, Joe Hickey, and his wife. They're from New Jersey. They're from Paramus, which is right next door to Rochelle Park, where Sacred Heart Church is. And when Joe and his wife started coming to Mass daily, I was thrilled, because my connection to Rochelle Park is because it's the honeymoon church, it's deep. And with Joe Hickey and his wife coming to Mass daily with us, it was just a beautiful connection. And almost like it brings it full circle for me. I loved having them there. So now that I'm retiring, I am presenting this to Joe, because Joe is going to return it to the church and give it to the current pastor with thank yous and gratitude from this pastor, who for 30 years has kept this church alive in his heart. So there it is. I was had a good time meeting Father David. I really like Father David. He's very devoted to St. Lawrence, and he was very thrilled to find out there's only we live so one St. Lawrence Church in New Hampshire. He's the one who's going to get it. He's very thrilled about it. He's got a good sense of humor. St. Lawrence says, you know, when he's burnt on one side, he says, turn me over on the other side, I'm done on this side. So Father David's got this sense of humor and found it very, the literature. So I'm sure a lot of this is legend, but he found the traditions very interesting. But he was just one of our martyrs. Well, Father David then comes in the other day, and he brings in this in the rectory, and I'm looking at that, and I said, I can't believe he's bringing in the statue of St. Francis. And I said, Lord, that's my sign. He belongs here. That's my sign. The Father David doesn't know I took it to the church, and he still thinks it's in the rectory, so don't tell him. So I end my preaching ministry at St. Lawrence Church, again with the prayer of St. Francis, what I've committed myself to, and what will be my spirituality for the rest of my life. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your support. I pray for you always. I believe in one God, the Father,
our church and parish.